Hello, everybody, and welcome to Commodity Culture, where our goal is to make you a better investor in the commodities space. My name is Jesse Day. Before we dive in, standard disclaimer: nothing here is investment advice. Do your own due diligence. And today's guest is the CEO of Eureka Lithium, the largest lithium-focused landowner in the northern third of Quebec, known as the Nunavik region, with 100% ownership of 3 projects. Jeffrey Wilson, it's great to have you on the show.
Jesse, thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
So, I want to start with a broad overview of the lithium space itself, dive into some of the supply demand fundamentals, and then talk about Eureka Lithium a little bit later. So, to start off with, talk to us about the current supply demand dynamics in place for the lithium market. How much demand is projected up ahead, and how tight is the supply situation at present?
Yeah, I don't think it's much of a surprise to anybody listening that, there has been an increased demand for lithium as it relates to batteries and clean energy. And of course, probably the most prominent being, electric vehicles. And so, the demand for global supply already, is sitting at numbers that we cannot attain. And as governments and simply consumer demand is driving the projected demand for that. We're looking at numbers exceeding 5, 6, 7, 10 times what the current demand is. Yet in terms of foreseeable supply, there is a significant deficit. We may be able to double supply perhaps over the course of the next 8 to 10 years is sort of what's being projected based on what's in front of us today. But the demand for lithium is projected to far surpass that in between now and 2030. And so, yeah, we really see a concerning deficit with no near term solution to fulfill that demand and generate that supply. And so that's where exploration, bringing all the way down the food chain from producing to right down to boots on the ground exploration to try to go out and find new discoveries and potential new supplies of the commodity for this growing, exponentially growing demand that we envision.
And for those trying to wrap their head around the lithium space, how does the market compare to other commodities in terms of volatility? We obviously saw lithium carbonate prices go very high for some time before coming back down on the other end. So I'm wondering, in terms of volatility and growth potential, how would you compare it to other commodities and other metals?
Yeah, it certainly was an explosive period for lithium. The price of lithium, say between 2021 and the earlier parts of 2023, no question, it was a substantial increase in value. We've seen that level off, and I think we've seen that in the past with other commodities. We saw that, let's say, in the early to mid 2000s with uranium, for example. A really significant spike in the price of uranium back in the mid 2000s, based off of fear of supply deficits to meet demand. There were a number of nuclear reactors being proposed, et cetera, around the world, and there just wasn't enough foreseeable supply, and so the commodity price spike. Now, there were some issues that related to why uranium eventually sort of leveled off again. But we're seeing again this sort of perhaps this euphoric sort of run in the price of lithium, as I say, between 2021 and 23, and now leveling off. And what I like about that leveling off is that if the price of a commodity continues to escalate and to go higher, it starts to create the need for alternatives. And eventually the end users say, this stuff is just becoming far too expensive for whatever our end use is, whether it's, batteries or electric vehicle batteries or whatever it may be. And so that end user starts to look for alternatives. And so seeing lithium now seeming to find a bit of a base and finding a bit of a range here that it's been trading in for the last, call it 6 or 8 months, I think is actually net positive. You level off that sort of euphoria where this thing is going to the moon, and you start to get into a price range where the end users can make long-term plans for their bottom line and their budgeting and their cost expectations, and be able to say, okay, we're going to focus our long-term growth on making sure that we implement lithium batteries as part of our production, and we can see that there is a stable price point there for the foreseeable future. And that's actually net beneficial for the commodity so that it doesn't outprice itself into forcing end users to find alternatives. And I think we're in that place right now with lithium.
So we're also now seeing some EV manufacturers investing directly in lithium. Back in the day, obviously, Henry Ford used to plant rubber and smelt his own steel, but we haven't seen that sort of direct investment activity by an auto manufacturer in like a century. So give us an overview of the investment in lithium by auto manufacturers and what it means for the industry.
Yeah, I mean, we've certainly seen more, I think, general conversation in the media over the course of the last couple of years about that, probably spearheaded largely by the likes of Elon Musk and Tesla, who were among the first to really sort of showcase the need for supply for these materials in order to be able to produce their products. So, we've seen Tesla looking to spend over $1 billion in the lithium space at various different stages of sort of the supply chain. We've seen GM again being fairly aggressive with an investment of nearly about $750,000, and Stellantis, which is formerly Chrysler, has invested somewhere close to $100 million, or is investing somewhere close to $100 million as well into the lithium space in order to generate or secure the necessary supply to make sure that they can fulfill their objectives in terms of the increased production of electric vehicles. And again, what you see with that securing of that is there's also secondary investment, which is investing into the process of building and manufacturing cars and making sure that this is a methodology that they plan to use for the foreseeable future, well past 2030 and beyond. And so if you're going to build factories and production lines that are going to utilize this commodity as its source of power and energy, you want to make sure that you don't run in a shortfall in supply. So they're going very far down the food chain, investing in not only production and mining of lithium, but right down to junior companies, small companies such as Eureka Lithium that are out looking for the commodity, and to make sure that there's a stream for the foreseeable future of supply, and trying to, as we mentioned at the beginning, satisfy that growing demand.
So you mentioned earlier that when prices get high enough for a sustained amount of time, people start looking for alternatives or substitutions for a particular commodity. So I'm wondering, are there any notable substitutions at present for lithium out there? I've been reading reports lately about sodium ion batteries. Could those eventually displace traditional lithium ion batteries?
There's no question that research and development is an ongoing process, and there's always going to be new technologies and emerging methodologies. I think that what we've experienced so far is that there's very little that really evidences that it has the same kinds of holding power or capacity as what we're seeing in lithium ion batteries. You've got aspects related to weight and various other aspects that can really dictate whether or not something truly can sort of trump the existing technology. And what you also get, good, bad, or indifferent, is many of the end users have to, as I mentioned earlier, they have to make long-term projections for their manufacturing, whether that's the systems they have in their factories or whatever it may be. And so sometimes those things, when they hedge on a bet, you're sort of like turning the Titanic a little bit to get them to move over to a new technology. Quite frankly, the process of going, let's look at automakers. The process of going from into electric vehicles en masse has still been a fairly slow process. And so, I think that's because there's quite a transition for the manufacturing of vehicles to make that change. And so, yes, there are alternatives, and there could be emerging alternatives, that emerge. But I think that in terms of where automakers are hitching their wagon, so to speak, is largely going to be based on lithium ion batteries.
Well, let's pivot to Eureka Lithium and discuss it specifically now. For those unfamiliar with the company, could you give us the 10,000-foot overview?
Yeah, so Eureka Lithium is a relatively newly established lithium focused exploration company. We are focused, as you mentioned earlier, in the northern part of the province of Quebec in Canada. This is an area that has mining history. There's been some very successful producing nickel mines in the region. With that, you get access to airstrips and deep sea ports and sort of an infrastructure for mining and an understanding from the local communities of mining. So we think we're in a mining friendly region, if you will. The Quebec government has been very friendly to mining historically. And the company was established on the back of prospects that were identified, land packages, property prospects that were identified by a very well known and renowned prospector who kind of came to us as a company as we were looking to embark on a new chapter for Eureka, and brought to us this land package, a very large land package of early stage, underexplored, but highly prospective land packages that we believe have the potential to host meaningful deposits of lithium. And so we've been focused on that solely over the course of the last 12 to 18 months, and building our business around exploring and seeking for discovery on these significant land packages.
You touched there on some of your initial reasoning for exploring for lithium in Nunavik specifically. Is there any more color you could give us on the region itself, its mining history, why you chose it? And you mentioned the government supportive. Maybe discuss your relationship with the local government and anything else you think is significant about that particular region.
Yeah, I mean, part of the reason we're there, quite frankly, is Shawn Ryan, who is the prospector who identified the opportunity. Now, Shawn's a gentleman who had significant success in the gold space in places like the Yukon and in Newfoundland in Canada. Conceptual, early stage ideas that over time became substantial discoveries and quite frankly, have become meaningful deposits and in some cases mines. Shawn identified that in northern Quebec, in this Nunavik region, there had been historic government surveying throughout the entire province. And yes, there is a lot of activity in a more southern region of Quebec, in James Bay, for example. There's a lot of exploration activity. There's some existing deposits and mining operations. But if you want to pick up a piece of ground in that very active, crowded space in Quebec, it's tough because there's only so much ground to pick up that's prospective. Shawn took the helicopter view and took a look at what the affinities, geological affinities, were up north, and recognized that they'd largely been overlooked. And the real primary driver for that was this government survey, as I mentioned, where the government did hundreds of thousands of samples throughout the entire province of lake bottom sediment sampling. And the reports indicated that the highest concentrations of lithium readings in that survey were in the northern part of Quebec. And when I say the highest readings, I'm talking about sample numbers that were in the 99.5 percentile of these hundreds of thousands of samples. And so that really, and not only were there individual samples that were that high, there were clusters of samples in the same general locations that ran that kind of lithium reading. And so, again, from a helicopter view, Shawn was able to say, well, look, there's something going on here, here, and here. These big land packages, elevated concentrations of lithium, and they're available for staking. And so we were able to go in and pick up that ground. Again, it goes beyond just some historic lithium samples. There's the right geological environment. There's the right structural environments. There's some slightly more technical aspects to it that Shawn and now our team are going through. But again, as a starting point, you want to take the guidance of a proven discovery mine finder, and we have that in Shawn. You want land that has a large amount of space because, again, this is a little bit like buying a lottery ticket. You want to have more tickets to give yourself a better chance at winning. And by having large land packages, you can test multiple different areas within those land packages to start to vector toward where the source or the hotspots of any lithium deposit may exist. So we were able to do a deal with Shawn whereby we acquired the ground that he had identified and staked. We didn't do so for cash. We brought in Shawn as a significant shareholder, so he's got an equity position in Eureka, which is important. It wasn't a take the money and run thing for him. It was, all right, let's get behind this story, and so he's been He stays on as an advisor. We've utilized an exploration crew that comes through his recommendation and has worked closely with him in the past. So that's a long answer for we think we've got highly prospective ground that's been identified with a very specific rationale behind it. And we think we've got the right people to do the necessary work to progress that to a discovery in the foreseeable future.
Give us some more background on Shawn Ryan because he is a legendary prospector and he's had an illustrious career thus far. Maybe you could give us some background, some further background on just what he's accomplished up until this point and why he decided to pivot his attention to lithium and how the whole deal came together between himself and Eureka Lithium.
Yeah, I mean, Shawn is a very well known and renowned prospector in our business, and I've known of his status and stature for a long time, without really knowing him personally for a long time. For very successful exploration campaigns, well, identifying targets and then acquiring them, rolling them into companies, and taking early stage conceptual ideas and systematically advancing those to discoveries. And in some cases, those discoveries by junior companies has led to major companies coming in and saying, thank you very much, we'll take it from here, and paying a hefty premium to market for all investors and shareholders to walk away, profitable, and maybe still have a legacy exposure to the eventual mine. So that strategy of coming in early, getting big land packages, putting in the good science to try to make a discovery, and then leveraging that into an exit strategy that makes all investors a return on their investment is the objective. And as I said, Shawn's done that in the Yukon, and that led to quite an extensive sort of staking rush in that area on the back of him being the first guy in. People sort of scratching their head, wondering what he's doing, and then on the back of success, everybody comes piling in behind. We've seen that same sort of success with Shawn in Newfoundland, again focusing on gold exploration in a part of Canada that had, gone kind of sleepy in more recent times, and then partly through Shawn's entree back into that region, we saw quite an extensive sort of rush into Newfoundland over the last 5 years or so, and so he's certainly got that track record and pedigree where people will pay attention and look at what he's going to do next. And we're seeing that already with Eureka and some of the investor interest that we're getting. But in terms of the pivot to lithium, that I think was driven largely by what we started this conversation talking about, the sort of the obvious shortfall in supply and limited, supply and increasing demand, and trying to identify a place where he could sort of duplicate his gold success in an emerging new commodity market.
Well, one of the most interesting things to me when I was looking into Eureka Lithium was the fact that you have some heavy hitters right next door to your property in the form of KoBold Metals. This is a company whose investors include Bill Gates, Richard Branson, Jeff Bezos, among others. What is KoBold Metals and what are they doing in Nunavik?
Yeah, well, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's wonderful to have neighbors like that. Certainly helps to draw a little bit more attention to what we're doing. And again, I think that this concept of potential sort of area play emerging is there's potential for that to happen here in Nunavik. And by having a couple of early adopters in there doing work, if that includes KoBold, if there is some, and Eureka, if there is some success to come from that, I think you will start to see others follow suit, and we may see a little bit more activity in the region. What is KoBold? They are a private company that has raised several $100 million over the course of the last few years. Their focus is to identify, explore for, identify critical metals, battery metals, lithium, cobalt, and others. They're looking at various parts of the world, including some places in Africa, but a big focus of their attention is the Nunavik region, and looking there as an underexplored, prospective region to find these necessary metals that Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates et al. Truly believe the world is going to need. And so to have them next door, not only does it draw additional eyeballs, but I think, as I said earlier, the end game often for junior exploration companies such as Eureka Lithium is we are explorers. We're very good at finding, making discoveries, and ensuring that the company is financed to continue on and do that. But we're not miners. And so at the end of the day, if you're going to have success as an exploration company, you have to be able to foresee a potential exit strategy. And the best exit strategy often is a buyout or a takeover from someone who's got deeper pockets and bigger, different capabilities than you, whether that's a major mining company or, in a case like this, perhaps the likes of KoBold Metals, who is definitely focused on identifying supply of these metals. And if we found it in sort of their backyard, um, you know, given their financial capacity, there may be an opportunity to attract someone like KoBold into this story. And from an investor standpoint, one of the things I like to point out is, you can go and take a look at KoBold and realize it's a wonderful story and a great opportunity, but it's private. So as an investor, you can't get any exposure to that. So if you want exposure to sort of the battery metal exploration world that's going on in Nunavik, that's been sort of validated by the guys at KoBold, you can do so through publicly traded companies like Eureka Lithium.
And what are the plans here in 2024 for Eureka Lithium and beyond? Your exploration activities and anything else you think investors should be paying attention to?
Yeah, I mean, for Eureka, 2023 was very much a setup year, if you will. We had the company was relatively newly listed. We did the deal with Shawn. We acquired 100% interest in the assets. We followed that up, or in tandem with that, we did a nearly an $8 million private placement, raising capital to be able to do the work and move forward. We got through an initial sort of a first phase of boots on the ground on the back of all of that, towards sort of the tail end of the summer and into the tail end of last year. Results from that work are still coming in, but that was very much a broad brush initial program where we've got these big land packages. They're in separate parts of Nunavik, and so to get boots on the ground and adequately explore and prospect over those, really, I would call 2023 sort of a first pass at that. And we got some sniffs, we got some indications, we got some good supporting information of where we might want to go next. And more information will come in over the course of the coming months that will really be a guiding light for what we do next. But 2024 is certainly setting up to be a much more significant year for us, in that first phase of data will all be in hand. We'll be able to evaluate and review that data. That will dictate, what the initial programs are going to look like come the spring when we can get back up there and get active. I think that we'll do much more detailed work. We'll get a larger crew on the ground this year, looking to vector towards drill targets. And my expectation is that we position ourselves to be able to drill one or more targets, hopefully several targets this year in 2024. And ultimately, drilling is sort of the ultimate acid test for finding out whether or not you're in the hunt for identifying a meaningful deposit. So that's really where the rubber hits the road for investors, is drill programs. In the interim, however, before we get very, very active in Nunavik, in that northern region of Quebec, say come the spring, in the interim, because as a publicly traded company with investors, we don't want to go dormant for any lengthy period of time. We've recently announced a letter of intent to take a position in a project that's a little further south, that's got some historic lithium values, has seen some prior drilling, successful prior drilling, and was available for us to acquire an option on acquiring 100% of that. That is because it's further south. It's road accessible. It's year-round accessible. It's drill permitted. And if we can get this letter of intent turned into a definitive agreement, we could be drilling there as early as January, February of 2024. So I envision, a really aggressive campaign of exploration work. That exploration work should generate significant news flow. And if we're fortunate enough to have some positive catalysts that come out of that, I think we could really have some significant growth over the course of the next 12 months.
Great. Well, I'll put a link in the description below this video and podcast for people who want to learn more about Eureka Lithium. I'll put a link to the website as well as social media so people can keep up to date on the company. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for joining us today and sharing your knowledge about both Eureka Lithium and the lithium industry.
Thanks, Jesse. It's been my pleasure.
Commodity Culture is a series on commodities and natural resources. If you would like to see more, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you're always up to date with the latest episodes.